As always, we encourage you to go to Natural Selections, which is where I write on Substack. Almost everything is available there for free, although I did post a short thing there this week for paying subscribers only that I called Maybe You Don't Need Enemies, prompted by my observations walking around parts of Portland, noticing, as I have in traveling many parts of the world in the past, how easy it is to reach people if you actually just change your face from totally neutral or worse to a smile. And it is remarkable how many people don't do that, and so immediately start interactions that maybe they'll never have with another person again, with a neutral or worse expectation. And it's rather easy to change that, and people are even more hungry for niceness and human connection than ever right now. So anyway, that's on Natural Selections now. You were going to add something?
No, I was just going to say that yes, the fear that has been used to corral us and direct us is obviously contagious in a way that has been demonstrated to be true of many emotional states. So yeah, your point about breaking that circuit by broadcasting something else, which is also contagious, I agree. That's a key.
This is a theme that will come up a little bit later on as we talk today, but also I think we should probably come back to it in longer form later. The contagion of emotions that is well understood in many circles and that is being weaponized and therefore used to create greater tribal divisions between us than we would otherwise have is stark. And the fact that, we can pretty much all see that it happens online, where we're not really engaging with the complete human being, even if we're engaging with someone who we know to be a real human being. The online existence is not their entire human beingness. And when we're actually engaging with another human being out in the world, even if it's someone we don't know, very often we go into it assuming this isn't going to work. There's nothing to be done there. I already know that the boundaries are drawn and that this is unlikely to be a person I can talk to. And by and large, that's not true.
Yeah. It's interesting that you remove, let's put it this way. It almost never happens that people break each other's noses, but the risk that it could happen actually sets bounds in the in-person interaction that cause most of those interactions to be a great deal better if you just simply lean into them.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, this is going to be a place where men and women have very different traditional ways of interacting and of how things can escalate when they go bad, and therefore what the threats are underneath things. And it's very rare that in all female spaces noses end up broken. But that's not to say that that terrifically bad things don't happen as a result of what can happen in those spaces. But they tend to happen via very different routes. And I think part of, as I've talked about before, as we've talked about before, part of the confusion of modernity is pretending that men and women aren't different, pretending in some places, imagining that going back to traditional roles would be the solution. No, can't happen, and no thank you. Pretending that the only way out of it, or imagine the only way out of it, is imagining that we're the same and therefore there's nothing to be negotiated. No, have you met people? Obviously that's not true. But knowing that we are different and we will never be the same, and that traditional roles are full of now outdated stereotypes, and some of them were always outdated or were never relevant, is what I mean. Means that we need to forge a way forward while recognizing that, on average, an all-male group will end up negotiating differences and mediating conversation and decision-making differently from how an all-female group will. And therefore, when, as in modernity, we have male and female groups together moving forward with decision-making and team-building and problem-solving, it is very likely that we need to be explicit and careful about recognizing that just defaulting to either male typical or female typical mode is not going to be successful.
So actually, long as we're here, It occurs to me that we have a story that illustrates the problem of the environment that takes the broken nose off the table.
Okay.
for those of you listening at home, stop me if I've told you this before, but we have a friend named George, I won't give his last name, who is a fellow cyclist who was cycling along one day. And because those in vehicles have very little risk from those on bicycles, there's a fair amount of weird stuff that gets directed at us sometimes. I've been hit by a BB once. People yell things, they'll honk trying to scare you to fall off your bicycle or whatever. George was cycling along.
Yeah, and a woman on a cycle gets a subset of things that men don't get as well, which is obnoxious and has an additional level of threat because obviously someone in a vehicle can catch up to someone on a bicycle unless you've got access to trails or thin alleys, and it's useful to have those. Anyway.
Yes, cat calls from some really uncool cats.
Beyond cat calls sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, George, not a woman, was...
Never identified as such.
Actually, we have not checked in with George. Don't know how it's gone, but as far as we know, still a guy.
I'd put some money on that.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah. Anyway, he was cycling along, minding his own business, and some dudes in a truck pulled up behind him. He was not noticing them, and one of them hurled a half-full beer can at him and hit him. And they shouted something out the window and sped off. George was enraged, as one might be, and he rode like crazy, and the dudes in the truck got caught at a stoplight several blocks away and did not realize that George was gaining on them. George pulled up to the stoplight, grabbed the guy who had thrown the beer can,
through the window,
pulled him through the window, and broke his nose and said, "Don't fuck with bicyclists." And I would imagine that guy has stopped fucking with bicyclists. So...
Or gone the opposite direction.
No, I'm pretty sure George made his point. A broken nose, that gives you time to think.
Yeah.
So anyway, my thought is that the car interaction, you are there in person, but the advantage that the driver and the passenger have over the cyclist makes it more like Twitter. But in this particular case, George's excellent cycling and the luck of the stoplight having brought those fellas to a halt turned the tables. And
there's literally a power differential.
Yes, there is.
I was trying to make a pun.
Power differential. Yeah. I'm going to diagram that later and figure out what it was, and then I'll.
Well, the vehicle has a differential, and the bicycle doesn't.
True.
Yeah.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I think the point is the risks in the situation set the rules. I've made the point in an article I wrote for Unheard that actually firing ranges and gun shops tend to be very polite places because presumably there are a lot of people possessed of firearms. So anyway, this is an interesting question.
Polite and, in my very limited experience, friendly.
Yeah,
friendly.
Welcoming. Very welcoming. All right. Well.
All right. So we were talking, I don't remember how we got on that topic. Oh, my Substack this week. Maybe you don't need enemies. Maybe you can drop the idea that everyone is likely to be your enemy out there and walk around being more welcoming and have just a better time of it when you're out there in the world.